Well, hello everyone, welcome back, and thanks so much for joining me once again. So last week I posted a series of stories on my Instagram account sharing my former home in the Cotswolds, and it generated quite a big response. And in fact, one person messaged me and said that perhaps I should think about doing a video for YouTube where I share my former homes, some of the interiors, the decisions behind each interior, and kind of the story of how I got to this point today. And I thought that that was such a great idea, and when I began to think about and look back at all of the homes that I've lived in from the age of 18 to now, where I'm 34, I realised that each home kind of tells the story of my life and is a very personal look back to who I am and how I developed my style and taste over the years. So I thought that this would indeed make a really great YouTube episode, so I thought that I would do that today and share all of my former homes. So let me start from the very beginning. I grew up in the West Midlands in a really small house. In fact, it was a 3-bedroom house. I've got 2 siblings and obviously my parents lived there as well. So it was quite crammed, but it was a really warm home, full of love, and we had an amazing childhood. But because it was small and I didn't have my own bedroom, I always yearned to have my own space, and I had this kind of eye for decoration and beautiful things. So by the time I was 18, I was really ready to move out and get my own place and put my own stamp on things. So when I was 18, I met my first boyfriend. He was 5 years older than me, and he just bought an Edwardian terraced house close to the area where I grew up. This was a beautiful house with high ceilings. It wasn't huge, it was 3 bedrooms, but it had high ceilings, a beautiful entrance hall with a gorgeous staircase, a big kitchen, and 2 reception rooms. And because he'd just bought it and hadn't really done any work, when he invited me to move in with him, we both decorated the house together, which was my first time decorating. I don't have any pictures of this house, sadly. I wish I could show it to you because it was my pride and joy at the time. For me, it was just everything I dreamed of, to finally have my own place and to have such a beautiful house. So that relationship lasted for about a year and a half, and when we broke up, I was really heartbroken, and I thought that I needed to just get away, start fresh. I'd never really liked living in my hometown, so I thought this was a good chance for me to try somewhere else and just start new again. Looking back in retrospect, it probably wasn't the best timing because I was heartbroken and I was kind of doing it on a whim. And it ended up being not a great decision because I was really lonely, homesick, and just not ready for that period of time in my life. But it was my first opportunity of renting my own home, being totally independent. I remember I rented an apartment in a beautiful harbourside location in Bristol. It was a new development of apartments and it was on the water, lots of beautiful cafes. It really felt chic and I was so happy to move there. My apartment was a 1-bedroom apartment and it cost me £500 a month. I only have 1 photograph of the living room. I think I can share that now. It was really sparsely decorated. I managed to buy myself a sofa, a dining table, and a small television, a bed. And although it was sparsely decorated, I had such pride in this home again, and I tried to make it as beautiful as possible. So I ended up living there for 1 year until my rental contract was over. And in fact, I used to drive back to my parents' house every weekend. I was really lonely and homesick, like I mentioned before, and I just couldn't wait to get home, see my friends. So I left Bristol after 1 year. I moved back in with my parents and I got a job in my hometown working for a bathroom company. Now this was quite a big bathroom company, and I worked in the head office doing administration for the returns department, which I have to tell you was not my finest hour. I was absolutely hopeless at this job. I just hated it. I found it so boring. I remember just sitting at my desk all day watching the clock, totally bored out of my mind, dreaming about having an exciting career maybe in the arts or fashion. I was 20 years old and I just didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. So at this time I was living back with my parents. My sister had moved out, so I got to have her bedroom. So I finally had my own room in my parents' house. So I was living with my parents for about 6 months, and then I met someone. And he happened to be living in Dubai at the time. So he was actually in the UK for work, although he was based in Dubai. And we'd been together for about 6 months, and he invited me to go to Dubai with him for 2 weeks. So I took 2 weeks off work. I went to Dubai, had the best holiday, and at the end of that holiday he said that he was going to need to stay here for some time. He didn't really want to have a long distance relationship. He knew that I was really unhappy in my job. So he said to me, why don't you, as a 21-year-old, quit that job, move here to Dubai and spend some time figuring out what you really want to do. So I did. I quit my job, I moved to Dubai with him, and it was just the most incredible experience. I finally had the chance to think about what I wanted to do. I tried a few things, and this process of trial and error, I think, is so important when you're a young person. We all go to school, college, maybe university, and we're kind of, the pressure on young people to figure out what they want to do is so immense, and I think so many people end up doing something that they completely hate or something that is completely wrong for them. And so to have the opportunity to be able to really take a year to think about what you want to do, try different things without any consequences, it was very privileged but really, really helpful and fortunate in making me figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And so if any young people are watching, I would say, don't be too pressured by school, university, in trying to think about what you want to do. What I would say is that really think about what your passions are, what gets you interested, and try and find a career doing that. I know it's not so easy. As I mentioned before, I was trapped in adulthood, in life, and I had to pay bills. And I know that is the case for many others. So it's not so easy as just, quit your job and figure out what you want to do. I was lucky at the time to have that chance. And I did try a few things. So one of my big passions at the time was clothing and tailoring. And I decided that I wanted to learn how to sew and make clothes. So I did a 6-month course. Before that, I'd never touched a sewing machine, learned about pattern cutting, anything. I didn't know anything. I just knew the type of clothing that I wanted to make. I did some sketches, and I did this course, and I learned how to use a sewing machine, how to read patterns, how to make clothing from patterns. And it was really fun and interesting. I enjoyed it. But I started to look into the fashion industry, and I realised that it was so competitive. Probably I wasn't that talented at it, and maybe that it wasn't for me. So for me, it was a wonderful time living in Dubai. It was kind of the first time that I'd explored other cultures. Although I'd been on holiday a lot as a child, I'd never really got to integrate and meet people from different backgrounds so much. And in Dubai, it is filled with people from all over the world who go to work there. You get to know people from all walks of life, and I just really enjoyed that aspect of living in a new place and mixing with lots of new people. And I've actually got friends from that time that I still keep in touch with on a weekly, daily basis. So by the end of 2012, my partner had to move back to the UK for some work that he was doing. And we decided to live as close to our families as possible. So we managed to find an apartment within a beautiful Georgian country house. Now for me, as someone who grew up in a really humble home, this was like a dream and something that I'd never seen. I remember when we went to view that apartment, I was just stunned by the scale, the features, the beauty of it. So this was the whole top floor of the house, and it was designed as a self-contained apartment. So the ground floor of the house was more like staterooms. It had a huge saloon, drawing room, a formal dining room, a formal library, and then lots of little rooms. It was very grand. Not something that you'd probably want to live in. It was more like when you go to see a stately home, these are rooms that visitors get to see. And then the apartment that we had was, again, on the top floor, and it was more like a home. It had a huge central hallway, about 25 meters long. It really was huge. I remember when we went to get a carpet fitted for that space and we said that it was 25 meters, they thought that we'd made a mistake and it was 25 feet, but it really was 25 meters. That kind of tells you the size. And then, so that ran through the center, and then off the hallway were all of the rooms. And so the back view had a view over the parkland, and the front view had a view over the wings of the house. So it was totally beautiful. I just absolutely loved living here. It was really close to my parents, close to childhood friends, so I felt so happy here. We didn't end up staying there for very long because the owner of the house unfortunately got into financial difficulty and he had to sell, so we moved out, and that honestly broke my heart. It took me about 5 years to get over that house. I just loved it so much. So this house was the beginning of my love affair with classic interiors, heritage design, but it didn't all start smoothly. So as a young 21-year-old, we didn't really know anything about design and decoration. When we began to decorate some of the rooms, I was making the most awful mistakes. So a great example was we started with the bedroom, and when we moved in it needed to be completely redecorated. And I remember going to Laura Ashley, which was a high street home store that doesn't exist anymore, but it's quite well known, and it did have quite traditional leanings. It was known to be a traditional brand. And I remember going there and picking out this chinoiserie style wallpaper in blue and cream. I will try and find a photo of that. And I just thought, oh, this is beautiful. I'm going to base the whole room around this. And we wallpapered the back wall, which had 3 Georgian windows, sash windows. And then we painted the rest of the room in a cream. And the owner of the house, who lived in the wing, who is a very talented interior designer, who specialized in restoring stately Georgian homes, came to see what we'd done. Not as an inspection, more of just, we were quite friendly with him and he wanted to come and see. And when he walked into the bedroom, he was shocked. And he just couldn't understand why we would only put wallpaper on one wall. And at the time I remember thinking, well, this is what everyone does, what is the problem? And he gave me a copy of a book by a lady called Henrietta Spencer Churchill. Now, she is the daughter of the late Duke of Marlborough, and they lived at Blenheim Palace. She is one of the UK's most talented interior designers. She grew up in Blenheim Palace, a stately home. She's been exposed to Georgian houses and the style that they actually should be. So he gave me a copy of this book and said, this will help you understand more about traditional classic design and what a house like this needs. And that was the greatest thing that he could ever have done for me, because, again, I was a young, naive 21-year-old, never lived in a house like this, and it really made me understand that you have to listen to a house, look at its past, and be sympathetic to it. And this is why nowadays so many people buy old homes and completely destroy them, tearing down walls, removing features. It's because they don't have an understanding of the past. And I think that is really, really sad. So this book was really like a masterclass in traditional heritage interior design, and it completely opened my eyes to how to look at a house, look at the past, look at the reason why you shouldn't wallpaper one wall in an 18th century Georgian home, and kind of take away the ignorance that you might have. So I read this book, I was completely obsessed with it. I pored over every single page, examining all the details. And I think that it gave me an education in classic design and was the beginning of a love affair with that kind of style. So as I mentioned earlier, we didn't get to stay there that long, which is a real shame because I think I would have been able to do something beautiful with that space. I always say thank you to that house for giving me a love and passion for beautiful traditional architecture and interiors, because if we didn't live there, I don't think that I would have discovered it so quickly. So after we moved out of this home, we decided that we would go back to Dubai. My partner was working there quite a lot. When we lived there previously, we'd been staying in a hotel called Grosvenor House, which is based on the Grosvenor House in London. So it's very British in feel. It had a British general manager called Pam Wilby, who was this very glamorous, elegant lady who wore bright coloured suits. We had friends there, and it felt like home. So we went back to Grosvenor House in Dubai for him to work and for us to kind of figure out what we were going to do next. During the summer, we would have to leave because it gets so hot that it's not really a nice place to be. It's just too hot. You're walking from the building to a car and you're rushing out just to get out of the heat. So we used to come back to the UK for the summertime, and on one particular summer, someone told us to visit the east coast of Scotland. So we went on holiday to a little town called Gullen, which is actually just 25 minutes from Edinburgh. And we stayed in a beautiful little B&B on the beach, and it was heavenly. And we really fell in love with that location, and we decided that we would look for somewhere to live there. We stumbled upon another country house apartment. So this was an Edwardian house built on the golf course by an industrialist, and this was his summer home in Scotland. It had the most incredible views over the Firth of Forth of the golf course. It is the most picturesque place. And this apartment was one of 5 in the building. This one was the largest and the original part of the house. So it was quite big, about 10,000 square feet. So about the time that we moved here, I just started my Instagram account. And I decided that I was going to document the decoration and my life living in this house. So I started posting almost every single day, bits of decor that we'd done, things that I bought for the house. Maybe we'd had a dinner party and I'd set the table, I would post a picture of that. And my Instagram grew pretty fast. And it was just the most wonderful time on Instagram. I'm not sure whether you remember back in the day when it first started, but it was a real place of community. I began to meet people from all over the world who really had the same interests in design, gardens, entertaining, and you connected with these people from all over the world. Nowadays, Instagram is very commercial, and unless you are an influencer or have a brand, you're not really given the chance to have a platform. Whereas back in the day, you could maybe share your life, share something that you were passionate about, like art, gardening, maybe you'd bought a house and wanted to share the process of decoration. It was not commercial in any way. It was kind of just sharing your passion, and you could grow really fast and build a community. It was so wonderful. So one of the other great things about Instagram was that I began to discover some inspirational interior designers and tastemakers. And one in particular who stands out is a designer called Howard Slatkin. Now, during this period, he released his first book, which was called Fifth Avenue Style, and this was documenting the restoration and decoration of his Fifth Avenue apartment. So this was one book about one home. Now, even though his style and taste is not really what I would have in my own home, it's really extravagant. Everything was very, very exquisitely expensive, beautiful. I was just so inspired by the way he lived so beautifully. So it was really the first time that I began to look at every single thing in the home as having to be a thing of beauty or something that you really love. Otherwise, it shouldn't be in the house. So cutlery, linens, napkins, light switches, taps, every single thing being beautiful, and that is what he did so well. It was all just perfect. So that book, I was kind of gripped with that one for about a year, and I just remember constantly looking at every picture, looking at the way that he set the table, looking at the way he had a little tray for cocktails, looking at the way he prepared a guest room. Everything was considered and beautiful. And with me living in this new house on the east coast of Scotland, it had 6 bedrooms. Because we lived so far from family and friends, I knew that we'd be having a lot of visitors. So I knew that I wanted to make this house special and implement all these lifestyle changes that I'd learned from Howard's book into my own home. And I think that was a turning point for me in how to be a great host, how to live beautifully. My parents used to come and stay for a week, 2 weeks at a time. My partner's parents the same, some of his friends, some of my friends. At Christmas we used to have both families over, so there'd be about 15 of us there. We used to cook, sing on the karaoke at the piano. My ex-partner was an amazing singer. It was just a house filled with fun and laughter, and it really was a peaceful home. So this is the library in the house, and this is the sitting room where we spent most of our time in the evenings, and this was really where I think I put together my most comfortable home. And I remember that when people used to visit, when we went into the library, they'd just be like, oh, this is so beautiful and relaxing in here. And I'd put into practice everything I'd learned through design books into that room. So grouping the sofas for conversation. So everything, we had 2 sofas facing each other, and then the 2 armchairs that I had in this flat as well. And you could sit in pretty much a circle, and everybody was able to look at the TV, everybody was near to the fireplace, everybody had a place to put the drink, everybody had a place to put their feet up. It was very comfortable. There was lamplight lighting the room with pools of light. It was just so comfortable and peaceful in that room. And I remember everybody just really enjoying that aspect of it. And this is actually the house that we spent the most years at. We were there for 4 years, between there and Dubai, when we had to go there for work. But it was really a peaceful time of enjoying Scotland, being at one with nature, enjoying walks, and really discovering about entertaining and personal style. And we decided to leave there after 4 years because although it was beautiful, the area is quite secluded. I didn't really make a lot of friends because the demographic tended to be older people who were more isolated in their homes, and the homes were really far apart from each other. So sometimes I was a little bit lonely there. And I'd always wanted to live in the Cotswolds, and that is something that we both wanted to do. So we decided to leave that house, We had to go back to Dubai for a year for some work again. We always ended up going back to Dubai. And then we thought that when we come back to the UK, we'd move to the Cotswolds. We knew that if we wanted to find a house, we would have to be actively engaged on the ground in the location to find one. We weren't able to do it from Dubai by looking through listings and doing online viewings. We knew that we had to go there to the location and see as many places as possible. So from Dubai, we managed to find a B&B in this beautiful old rectory. And this lady who owned it had lived there for 50 years. Her husband had died, I think like 20 years before. He died quite young. And she had run the house on her own for all that time. And it was the quintessential country house that you could imagine in the Cotswolds. She was a very avid gardener. She had a beautiful garden. The house inside was typical English country house, lots of personal items, books everywhere, worn furniture that was utterly charming, just everything you could imagine a Cotswold house to be. And I think we stayed with her for about 8 weeks whilst we looked for somewhere to live. And I really loved that time. It was May, so spring. The garden was beginning to bloom, and it was the perfect introduction to the Cotswolds. So we did manage to find a house in a village in the Cotswolds called Blockley. Now, I had my heart set on finding an old house, but it just wasn't meant to be, and we ended up moving into a new build. Now, although it was a new build, it was designed to look like an older house. So it was built with Cotswold stone, it had wooden sash windows, and the style felt like a typical older Cotswold country house. So throughout all the homes that I've lived in, I've had a period of growth, like I mentioned before. And for this house, this was the period when I really started to get interested and start to learn how to upcycle, paint furniture, try new things, and kind of get to this point in my life where last week I'm gonna gild a mirror without ever trying and just seeing how it goes. And I remember the first piece of furniture I ever painted was the French sofa that is now in my bedroom. And I was so nervous about it. I spent about a week watching a million YouTube videos. I found a book about painting furniture by Annie Sloan. And I was so nervous about it, and now I look back and think, why? It's so easy just to apply the paint. If it doesn't work, you can do it again. You can start from scratch. But there was something about the first ever time doing it that I was just so nervous about. But doing that first project just did something to me where I felt, wow, this is amazing, and I love doing this, and I have to continue. So it was really that house that brought out my creative side, wanting to transform pieces of old furniture, maybe do a bit of crafting, DIY, and I spent a lot of time in that house. We bought a lot of furniture from all over the UK. We would hire a van and go and pick up pieces from here, there and everywhere. I also bought a few chairs, the one that I'm sitting on now. These were reproduction chairs in cherry wood with an awful fabric. I recovered them all. I learned how to reupholster and recover and then paint them. And I really felt like I learned how to do a lot of things for the house, which I've shared on this channel. So we lived in the Cotswolds for 2 years, and we actually moved out of the house in Blockley and into an apartment in Cheltenham. So Cheltenham is a Regency spa town. It has more of a lively atmosphere. It is filled with pubs, bars, restaurants, and I just wanted to have a bit more life. Even though living in the country was nice, again, it's quite isolating, and so living in Cheltenham was the antidote, to be able to live in the Cotswolds and enjoy all of the benefits of the beauty and things to do, but also have more of a lively, outgoing place to live. So we had a small apartment in Cheltenham. This was one of my very favourite interiors that I've done. You can see that we had quite a big drawing room with 3 large windows, high ceilings, and this room just gave me the perfect proportions to use all of the furniture and decor items from the house in Blockley and make it into something quite special here. And I used to post quite a lot on Instagram from this place, and I gained quite a lot of followers by sharing this room. It was featured in a few online blogs, and I think the feature wall that I created at the back of the room, which was actually from a set of botanical prints out of a book about Marie Antoinette's garden, which I just tore from the pages of the book and had them framed, that became quite Instagram famous at the time, and that was definitely a well-known feature of my interior. It's only now that I'm talking about all these different places that I actually realise how many times we moved house. And as anyone who's moved knows, it's very exhausting, very stressful, and I think that's now why, living on my own, I don't want to move for a long time. And I know that I've talked about maybe moving to the Cotswolds again or moving to Italy, but actually I think I'm just happy to stay here for a while and not have to move again. So after living there, we somehow ended up back in Scotland. I think my boyfriend really missed Scotland. He had a huge affinity for it, and I think he had a bit of nostalgia for the area. But because we'd already lived on the East Coast and I wasn't particularly wanting to move back there because it was quite isolated, we made the compromise of moving to Edinburgh. Now, when we lived on the East Coast, we did used to come into Edinburgh quite a lot for shopping, for dinners, to see the theatre, so I was familiar with it. But to be completely honest, I never wanted to move to Edinburgh. I felt like I'd done Scotland, even though I thought it was beautiful. I didn't particularly want to live back here again. It is really far from London, where I was doing a lot of work. It's far from my friends and family. The weather isn't amazing. And I just couldn't imagine having a life in Edinburgh where I would be happy and fulfilled. So moving to Edinburgh at that time was it wasn't really a decision that I wanted to do, and it put a big strain on our relationship, and I think it actually is one of the reasons that ended up splitting us up. Even though we'd talked about it for quite some time before then, and we kind of just stuck together because we'd been together for so long, moving to Edinburgh was a big pressure because I didn't really want to come here. So as it turns out, we moved to Edinburgh, and pretty much as soon as we moved here, like within 2 months, we decided that we were going to split, and we ended amicably, which is another story, but yeah, ended completely fine. We're still friends, and I ended up staying in Edinburgh, and miraculously, the pandemic is the reason why my life here has been so good. And I'm not saying that the pandemic was good in any way for anyone. It wasn't. It was an awful time. But I think during that time, there was a real sense of community and wanting to support your neighbour. So when the pandemic was going on, because we were doing a clapping for the NHS, every Thursday, everyone on all of the streets in the UK would come out onto the doorstep and clap for the NHS. And it was then that I got talking to some of the neighbours. We were getting into spring, Maytime, and someone said, why don't we have a socially distanced drink with all of the neighbours tomorrow, which was a Friday. So I went to that. I ended up meeting Vanessa. I met some other people, and I built a community here in Edinburgh, which I still have to this day. I've managed to build a YouTube channel and a business and a brand. And I don't think that would have ever happened in this way if I hadn't moved to Edinburgh. So the lesson from that is that even though a door may open that you might not think is what you want, sometimes it turns out to be the very best thing that can happen for your life. And I was literally kicking and screaming moving to Edinburgh. I didn't want to move here at all. I was quite happy in the Cotswolds. But it turned out to be the very best thing for my life. And if someone would have told me back then that you will end up being on your own in Edinburgh, living here and enjoying it, I could never have believed that would be the case. And life is so funny like that. It sometimes gives you things that you would never expect and that you may never think you want, but which turn out to be excellent. So yes, my YouTube channel was born and grew here in Edinburgh in my old apartment. Then when I was single, I moved here to this current place. The very first place that I've ever lived on my own. When I told you about my house in Bristol when I was really young, I actually lived there with a partner who I met in Bristol. So I didn't live there on my own. So this was the first time that I've ever lived on my own. And I have to say that it took me probably until last year to get used to and be comfortable living by myself. And that may come as a surprise because I come here every week and talk about being this person who is calm, relaxed and has all my life together. But honestly, living on your own after living with others for your whole life, for like 30 years, you're forced to look at yourself and you're forced to deal with life every day. And I just think the pressures of life can be hard, and when you have to deal with them all on your own, it can be difficult when you're not used to them. But I'm so glad that I've gone through this. At the time I kept thinking, oh, I hate being single, I don't like it, I don't like being on my own, but I think I needed to have that period in my life where I had to be on my own for 2 or 3 years to learn how to survive and to be at peace with myself. Otherwise I may never have had that. And I can sit here confidently and say that although I'm no longer single and I'm with someone, I can live on my own, I can deal with my own emotions, I can sit down with myself and be happy with who I am as a person. And that is a wonderful thing. So yes, and that brings me to this current point in my life, in this apartment. And I have to say that I think because I've lived in so many houses and with my ex-boyfriend I got used to constantly moving around. I do have a sense of having itchy feet and wanting to look all the time at moving. Just last week I went to view an apartment around the corner here, and it was a 2-bedroom, first floor apartment with tall ceilings, sash windows, gorgeous fireplaces, a big kitchen. And I went there and I went to see it, and it was nice, but it doesn't have an outdoor space, which this apartment has. And you know, I've lived here, I've put a lot of love and effort into this home. I've spent time decorating, painting, agonising about decisions about where to put paintings, and I don't think I want to move. I'm quite happy being here. I like this location. All of my friends are very close by. I like being able to walk outside into my own little courtyard, and then when I cross the street I've got a beautiful park garden. So I'm going to stay here for a while, and I enjoy sharing the journey of my decorating decisions. I know that it might drive you all crazy sometimes when I'm constantly changing things and moving things, and it really has been a slow process in this home because I have a budget that I have to stick with. I don't have a lot of money to spend. Everything has to be done with consideration, so it does take time, and I'm really glad about that. It probably wouldn't be very much fun if I had unlimited budget and I could just do everything I wanted to do without even thinking of it. I actually like the fact that I have to think about everything and have to wait for things. I enjoy that process and that journey. But yes, this room is ever evolving. There were a few comments the other day on the last video with the mirror about the lamp being in front of the Jonathan Fremantle abstract painting. That was just literally there for a week or so, just because I didn't know where to put the lamp. So again, a decision that is temporary and transitional. This room, I do love it, but I think it's still not completely finished and ready yet. Probably never will be. There's things that I want to add, but again, I have to wait for them. So it is always a process and something that I really enjoy about life. So I hope this hasn't been utterly boring. At times when I've been filming this, I feel like I'm rambling, but it is quite hard to put into words sort of 13, 14 years of moving house and living in lots of different places. I have to try and trigger memories and think about how everything happened. But I hope that it has been interesting. I hope it has given you more of an idea about who I am as a person. I think sometimes I'm quite guarded on this channel and don't really give a lot about myself out there. So maybe this will answer some questions and tell you more of the story of how I came to be here today and how I started my career and how I got to this point. Before I leave, I just wanted to let you know about a special offer that I'm doing over on my shop, nicolasverford.com, where you can buy all of the Nicolas Verford product. As Mother's Day is coming up here in the UK quite soon, I know that you celebrated a different date in the US and other parts of the world, but it is coming up soon here in the UK. So to celebrate, I'm doing a special offer where if you spend over £45, you get a free Botanica print. Now you may recognise this as the artwork from my Botanica candle. It is on the label there, can you see? So this is a print, and this beautiful flower was created, I designed it with an artist called Israel de Alcantara. And he created this artwork especially for Botanica products. So it doesn't come in a frame, it comes with the print, and it's very nicely packaged in a cardboard scroll so it won't get damaged. So yes, if you would like this print, you have to spend £45 and this is included, and that includes the US, worldwide. So I think it will automatically apply to your order. It will convert the currency to your order. If you've spent over the amount, you will get the free print, and it will let you know that that has been applied to. So you don't have to add a discount code or anything like that. It will just automatically be applied if you spend the required amount. So yeah, I thought that I would share that with you. If you're subscribed to the Nicolas Verford newsletter, you will get more information about that on the newsletter, which is coming out, I think, today. So do check that out. Thank you so much for joining me. I really hope that you have enjoyed this episode. I look forward to seeing you next time, but until then, take care. Bye-bye.